Lumumba.
First and foremost, I think if lies are repeated severally, they assume to be truth. I can now sincerely say that both my sister here and Chris Foot have not read neither the harmonized draft constitution nor the sessional paper number 3 of 2009 on the national land policy. The issue the national land policy is addressing is an issue of governance of the land sector. And that issue of governance, it is looking at it from the point of where is the problem. The problem in the land sector was the uncoordinated administration and management of land, which had many line ministries that were uncoordinated. It had many institutions that were not at the same page on doing this. And one of the most notorious institutions that was meddling in issues of land was the institution of the presidents, which had such powers to allocate land even when the law is very clear, only to deal with the land that is available for allocation. They went ahead to deal with land that was not available. The other institution correlative to that was the institution of the county councils that were custodian of trust lands, which are ordinarily land of people, ordinarily resident in that areas of the jurisdiction. These county councils went ahead to deal with those lands as if they were their own property. So to that extent, what the policy is dealing with is basically to say, here we had the presidents, it had its own delegation to the Commission of Land. Both parties have dealt with land very badly. So how do we redress that? The introduction of a democratic, devolved structure that is called the National Land Commission. The National Land Commission is clearly in charge of public land as provided for in the National Land Policy. It also has to deal with the streamlining of the management of it. When you move to the issues of land at the developed level, at the district level, it is the district land board that is in charge of land at that level. When you move at community where trust land belong, it's the community where we are going to have elected democratic representatives of people who are going to administer that. So I want to leave the issue of that very clearly, as stipulated both in the harmonized draft and the national land policy. When you come to the issue of properties, this national land policy and the harmonized draft of constitution is very clear in the protection of private property. However, it gives a rider that in Kenya we have a history where property has been acquired in suspect manner. It has other claimants, which claimants have not only expressed their claim, but they have gone ahead to jeopardize the tranquility, sustainable development and management of land in form of clashes, which we have had in this country. In terms of conflicts, our courts are full of disputes emanating from land. 3/4 of all court cases are about land. So in this element, our history feeds to the position that some people were dispossessed of their land, and they have claims to put on table. The policy says, time has come, we investigate this thing, we deal with it very clearly. It is not a question of removing land from one person and just giving it to the other. It's not a question of arbitrariness. It's a question of looking at all factors. Is the land in question capable of being restored? If yes, that could happen. If not, another alternative compensation mechanism should be sought to deal with that. And therefore, it's not a question of doing that. And therefore, when Chris Foot comes here to tell people that the government has been given such powers to confiscate land from those who rightly own it, that is not just a lie. It's an absolute misguided propaganda. It has no position in the draft constitution, neither in the current constitution, neither in the policy as stipulated. And if we want to give him a benefit of doubt, let him read verbatim where that he gets it. What section, what paragraph does he get these things? So this conjure of people who have benefited unduly, unfairly in matters of land to come here to protect their self-conceited vested interest, when we know very well that yes, a few Kenyans own huge acreage of land, but what's the net result? We have a degraded environment. What's the net result? Over 56% of Kenyans are living below poverty. What's the net result? 60% of all our urbanites are living in slums. Is that what anybody would wish this country to be?
Right.
Is that what we should draw through?
Let me jump in there, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, this is usually how the debate goes, which is as soon as we start discussing facts, vitriol comes into it and personal slander comes into it. Let me deal with some of those issues one by one. As a lawyer, I have read this in detail, and as most people will know, the devil is in the detail. So it's very good for the likes of Ademba to go around the country telling everyone all their problems will be solved, when fundamentally there's a very left-wing socialist agenda behind this in terms of land rights in Kenya. And in terms of dealing with the ideologies about it, there's two fundamental views here. You have the wealth creation side, which is people like me, who fundamentally believe we need property rights, and this country cannot go forward without property rights. And there's a very left-wing agenda of people like Mr. Lubumba, who feel that everyone in Kenya who has a title deed must have got it illegally, irregularly, and must have it taken back. I'll deal with some of those issues in particular. But the issue of this National Land Commission. The National Land Commission is appointed by Parliament and verified by the President. So the ruling party of the day will control all the land in Kenya. It will control the public land, it will control the community land, and it will have some aspect to control the private land as well.
But doesn't that argument essentially, isn't it based on the premise that Parliament essentially will be a supine and useless body that will have essentially one body, or is the case now you've got half of it in government?
Well, ostensibly what it means is you're going to have a government quango, a parastatal, controlling land in Kenya. At the moment, we have the Constitution, which has the final say on land in Kenya, and not the National Land Commission. The National Land Commission will be given powers in order to levy taxation. That should be a prerogative of Parliament. The National Land Commission will be given powers to investigate injustices. That should be the power of the courts. So on that aspect there, Mr. Lumumba knows full well that he's been disingenuous in saying they have no powers. In terms of quoting verbatim this issue about compensation of land, Chapter 7 of the Harmonized Constitution, Section 59.3, clearly says that the state will not respect land which results from acquisitions of land or interest in land which basically fall under Chapter 7. So anything that falls under Chapter 7 is exempt from the compensation process. Now, either he hasn't read it or he's been Machiavellian and not telling the people what's in it. Furthermore, in Section 59.5, when they're talking about compensation rights, they say the state will agree with compensation except where it's unlawfully acquired. Unlawful has not been defined. And we know the likes of Mr. Dumba and I are going to have very different views on what unlawful is. They've got issues about ancestral land. Throughout the policy is this issue of restitution. He talks about compensation. They actually remove the word compensation. They put restitution. That means that land that historically there'd been some injustice on will now revert back to those people. And without the compensation, people do have an issue to be worried about. And this nonsense of trying to paint anybody who wants change on the reform as somebody who is either a land-grabbing politician or grab the land themselves is entirely disingenuous and honest, and he knows it.
I will have to jump in there. We are going to be taking a short break right about now. When we come back, we'll be picking up on these particular issues, the politics, the policy, and the legalese, quote-unquote, behind the national land policy. Who's telling the truth? Who's feeding a lie? All the details coming up next right here on KTN Newsnight.